something that we're going to have to wait a long time for, maybe forever for, Cayman,
RIP.
is the return of E3 because E3 is dead. RIP. I'm pulling from Rebecca Valentine at IGN. This news broke. It's funny. At the end of last episode, we were like, next week we're going to talk about this because we feel like E3 might be dead. And then like 24 hours later, it
was a solid call on your part.
Yeah. Almost a year after announcing its return, the Entertainment and Software Association announced today to its members that this year's Electronic Entertainment Expo, widely known as E3, has been canceled. IGN can confirm. Two sources have confirmed to IGN that the organization announced the cancellation via an email sent out to its members today. The email said that while E3, quote, remains a beloved event and brand, end quote, that the 2023 version, quote, simply did not garner the sustained interest and the sustained interest necessary to execute it in a way that would showcase the size, strength, and impact of our industry, end quote. The ESA concludes the email by reiterating its commitment to advocacy work. It does not mention undertaking the show again in future years. And then following that report, the ESA did issue another public statement from Kyle Marsden-Kish, Global VP of Gaming from Repop, that said, this was a difficult decision because of all the effort we and our partners put toward making this event happen. But we had to do what's right for the industry and what's right for E3. We appreciate and understand that interested companies wouldn't have playable demos ready and that resourcing challenges made being at E3 this summer an obstacle that they couldn't overcome. For those who did commit to E3 2023, we're sorry we can't put the showcase on that you deserve and that you've come to expect from ReedPop's events experiences. The press release adds that ReedPop and the ESA will continue to work together on, quote, future E3 events. So they did later say there will be future E3 events, but they didn't say there will be a future E3, just future E3 events. So like a little muddy. But to continue with Rebecca's report, the event was supposed to be held June 13th through the 16th at the LA Convention Center and would have been the first in-person E3 since 2019. The event was canceled, obviously, in 2020 due to the pandemic. And while a digital version was held in 2021, the event was canceled in 2022 again in an effort to focus on revitalizing the showcase that would set a new standard for hybrid industry events. E3's return for this year was announced just last June, alongside the confirmation that E3 2022 had been canceled. The news comes as multiple big names in the industry, from Xbox, Nintendo, PlayStation, and most recently Ubisoft, announcing that they would not be attending E3 in any capacity, with most opting to host its own digital showcases. So, Cayman, before I jump into some questions I have for you, I think it's important to give some clarity, give some context to our audience in case they're not super familiar with E3. A lot of folks in the industry and like enthusiast folks like me and Cayman would always kind of think of E3 as like the Super Bowl of video games.
Yeah.
It was like half a week, usually like a Wednesday to a Sunday. Of the first half of the week would be showcases from PlayStation, Nintendo, Xbox. And then, as the years went on, we'd get them from Ubisoft, Bethesda, Square, like all of the major publishing houses in the gaming industry would come together, and each of them for like 30 minutes to an hour just be like, hey, these are all the games we're working on that we want to share. This is when some of them are coming out. And it was essentially just like the most hype week ever. We would learn about all of the things that are coming up. There would like always be this like dry spell leading into the summer because everyone was waiting to announce their stuff at E3. So it was just like such a fucking awesome thing. But like over the last, what would you say, like decade, it just like slowly kind of started.
Yeah. The pandemic definitely.
And then the pandemic was like the death blow.
Yeah, it was the nail in the coffin.
But do you think that this is the end of E3? Like, do you think that it will ever come back? Or do you think like Summer Game Fest by Jeff Keighley is like the new evolution of what E3 will be?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I don't think that this will be the end of E3. It is the end of E3 as we know it.
Yeah.
I could see us getting a more digital version of that where they attempt to do it. But like I think the big thing is you got to think about like the financials involved in something like that. Like just going to a trade show alone, like how much money goes into just doing just like a standard trade show. It's thousands and thousands of dollars for just a small company to attend just a standard trade show. And when we talk about E3, we're not talking about like your fucking, RV and camper trade show in Macon, Georgia. Like, that's not what
Yeah.
like, this is literally like these companies are spending easily hundreds of thousands of dollars
Yeah.
to be there.
Sometimes, I mean, maybe like $1 million plus.
Yeah. And so financially, especially after the pandemic hit, it doesn't really make sense anymore. We've moved to much more of a digital space that, like, there's really not a need to have something like this where you just have one big event every year and that's when you drop shit. Especially, I think Jeff Keighley kind of started to poke holes in the formula of E3 by introducing the Game Awards and Summer Game Fest, where he was like, yes, like, we can still hold this in person, but like, this is much more valuable as like a value proposition to these companies.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be shocked to see if like they do try to pull something off, but it's more small scale, all digital, and then you have like indie publishers showing up, and that's really it. I don't think we'll ever see an E3 that pulls in the likes of Microsoft or Sony or even Nintendo. I mean,
Sure.
especially now that they're doing, like, Microsoft is doing their showcases, or what do they call them? Their
Developer _ direct.
fucking stupid name.
Yeah.
Sony has their state of plays, Nintendo has their directs. A lot of companies just hold their own shit too. So like, I don't think we'll see that, but I do think it's important, like the legacy though, Patrick, of E3. One of the biggest moments that a lot of people reflect on when talking about E3 is what they call is the moment was the console killer moment.
Oh man.
And that was when, well, there's multiple of those, but it was the first one that ever happened with Sony. It happened back in 1995 when they introduced the Sony PlayStation. And this was like on the heels. You had like Sega was like pushing their shit. Nintendo was kind of like the hot stuff, and Sega was kind of like trailing them. And then Sony comes out and is like, we have a disc-based console.
Yeah.
They can store so much more. And look at this graphical fidelity. Also, this is the price point. And it was like just an absolute shell shock moment that like just completely disrupted the way that video game consoles work.
Yeah.
And like, that is what E3 was for years. Patrick, one of my personal favorite moments was actually when G4 was still a thing.
Yeah.
Back, I want to say it was, I mean, shit, we just watched G4 all the time, X-Plane, all that. But G4 would always do during the week of E3, they would do from like when the doors open for public or for journalists until doors closed. They would be holding all day events, press coverage.
It's so fucking cool.
And I would just sit there for hours in front of the TV, just watching all of these incredible new games being released. And it's just, and so like we grew up on this. Like E3 was incredibly important. And, I guess the thing is nothing gold lasts.
Yeah. It just, that the other thing that I kind of didn't mention when I was kind of providing that context was, so the first half of it would be all of those showcases, and then the second half would be open like for journalists and people that were invited to do demos and things like that. And then there would be like the G4 TVs that were just showing us footage of all these new games and interviewing developers. And yeah, I remember like summer when we were still in school, that week was magic. It was just so exciting to just sit on the couch all day and just watch learn about the new Zeldas and the new Marios and these new games, like especially like as the tech started getting bigger and better, like seeing like, oh my God, this is what video games are now.